Hey there, I'm Lee Ullman here with some big news from the National Young Farmers Coalition. We're partnering with Heritage Radio Network on a special season of The Farm Report. It's all about what's happening with the Farm Bill and how it impacts farmers and eaters.
I am growing diversified vegetables on land that's been in our family for 150 years.
And so with the pandemic, gentrification, property values going up, we had to sell the land and we lost it.
Join us as we uncover the untold stories behind this massive piece of legislation that shapes how we grow our food, what we eat, and so much more.
The problems we have had, those are things that come from earlier Farm Bill and USDA policy, right? Like Earl Butz, get big or get out.
You know, it's my responsibility to know not only what I'm eating, but then like how that all came to be. And realize like, wow, like this piece of legislation, all this money, like it's technically something that I support as a taxpayer.
While Congress debates the next Farm Bill, this is not just an invitation to listen. It's a call to action. Be part of the conversation. Subscribe to the Farm Report on Heritage Radio Network, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Today's program has been brought to you by Fairway Market, like no other market. A New York City institution that sells the best local, national, and international artisan foods for prices that can't be beat. For more information, visit fairwaymarket.com. Broadcasting live from Bushwick, Brooklyn, you're listening to heritageradionetwork.org.
Well, hello. This is Chef's Story, and I'm Dorothy Cann Hamilton of the International Culinary Center. And today we are not broadcasting from Bushwick, Brooklyn. We are at Manresa in Los Gatos, California, where it is sunny and absolutely beautiful. And I'm sitting here with Chef David Kinch, which every chef in America knows who David Kinch is. But if you're out there and do not know David Kinch, he's one of the most talented chefs in the world right now, and he's been known a lot to the foodie crowd because in 2010 he won the James Beard Award for Best Chef in the Pacific. In 2010, Manresa, his iconic restaurant out here, got 2 Michelin stars. In only 2009, he was a rising star chef for Food and Wine, and he's made the top 50 world's best restaurants from Restaurant Magazine, Gourmet, and the San Pellegrino of 50 top restaurants in the world. And of course, the San Francisco Chronicle, his local, gave him 4 stars. And this week is his 10th anniversary, so I'm so excited to be here. David, I just can't wait to jump in and talk to you about how all this came about and how you became a chef. Welcome.
No, thank you, Dorothy. Thanks for including me in this. This is great.
Okay, well, I just have to, I hear you're a New Orleans boy.
Yeah, I grew up in New Orleans. I went to school, not originally. I was born in Philadelphia. But I traveled a lot in the Deep South. My father moving around, spent what I call my formative years in New Orleans, and certainly where the place where I developed my love for the restaurant business and the love of good food.
So what ages were you in New Orleans?
I was there from the time I was 15 to about 22.
Oh, so those were really formative palate years.
Yes.
So when did you develop a love for Cajun cooking, Creole cooking, or did you have a palate back then, or you started working in restaurants?
Yeah, I started working in restaurants because flexible hours. I could work on weekends. I could work after school, work in the evenings, and that sort of thing. And I just kind of fell into it. I fell in love with the excitement. The same reason everybody else who's in the industry for a long time is
now,
in
wait a minute.
it for.
GQ magazine said you were a waiter first, and then you were watching the guys in the kitchen, and they were talking loud and bad.
Well,
that was more exciting for you.
I started working in the back of the house. I was doing some dishwashing work and bussing work at some casual family type restaurants, and then I started training as an assistant waiter at a very nice restaurant then at that time. And I realized very quickly that the front of the house and customer relations was not my forte. And I found myself spending more and more time and showing more and more interest in actually what was going on in the back of the house. And I was fascinated by they were being creative. I saw great food in the dining room, but I saw the atmosphere that it was coming out of, and the fact that people were being creative and they were working quickly because they had a timeline, and they were working with fire, and they were being creative, and they were causing a certain amount of happiness and pleasure for guests. And I found this fascinating, and that's what drew me to it. To this day, I like working with my hands and being able to be spontaneous and creative.
So your father was a civil engineer.
Yes, he worked for the same company, an oil company, for most of his life. We spent a good part of our young lives traveling around a lot, not spending a lot of time in places, moving around from school to school. I have never viewed that as any kind of detriment in any kind of way. I think it's where I kind of got my wanderlust.
Did you sample food? Was food a part of that? Were your parents foodies? Did they expose you to regional cuisines?
Well, we were coming from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and going to the Deep South. We learned a lot about a lot of different foods and regional foods very, very quickly. It wasn't, it was a part of our lives. It wasn't a major part of our lives. It certainly wasn't a foodie culture kind of thing. But I think...
Did you have an aha moment when you said, oh my gosh, this food is, really complex, it's really compelling, it's really...
Well, I think, when I started working working in kitchens, and I realized how deep it was in terms of, learning and knowledge, I think moving around a lot as a kid, I kind of encouraged my wanderlust. And I think one of the reasons I was attracted originally was I thought it would be a good opportunity to see the world. You can cook anywhere, you can move around, perhaps work for a hotel chain or something like that. That's how I remember thinking about it. And then in New Orleans, this was a long time ago. We're talking about the mid to late 70s. So, France was kind of, the holy grail, and I became really fascinated with French food and French restaurant culture, and did a lot of reading. Quentin Blake's book, The Great Chefs of France, was a real turning point for me, reading that book. I had that book memorized, the handwritten menus in the back. There was this whole menu section in the back of the book. And just reading about it was just this huge education for me, and it just made me want to go to France somehow, to figure out a way to go to France.
Well, was it the chefs in France and their attitude towards food, or was it the product in France?
It's probably a little bit of both. The fundamental tenets, that I think we try to follow today here at Manresa, and I think it's one of the fundamental themes that all great restaurants share, regardless of location, is a certain amount of respect for the product, great product, and treating it respectfully. And I think that's what really resonated with me, reading that book and others, at that time. And
what was it about the chefs, though, in that book?
They were doing food that I just found amazing. I certainly wasn't able to taste it. I was reading at the end of working every day, and back in New Orleans at that time, and then off to culinary school. And I think it was just, they had this great dedication to offering pleasure to people, and this was really the start where chefs started becoming known. This is the area, this is the time of Bocuse and Gerald and
Verger.
And Verger, guys who were all of a sudden they were in the media, and they were using the media to promote. And it was a major turning point, of course, in our industry, in that it's where the chefs really kind of came out from the shadows and from the restaurateurs or the front of the house. And instead of just being, the honest workers in the kitchen, they started to step out to the forefront. So I think, of course, there was a certain amount of attraction with that also.
So you were working in various restaurants in New Orleans and then decided to go to Europe or go to school, or how did that unfold?
Yeah, I decided, there was a point where I decided, this is what I wanted to do. I did it at a fairly young age, and I decided, I wanted to be a chef. I wanted to work with food, and I went to culinary school right out of high school. I went up to Johnson Wales up in Providence. I was up there for 2 years, 1980 and 81. I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but culinary schools have changed dramatically in not only in the past 25 years, but even just the past 10 years, the way curriculum and how it's changed. So I went up there, and I came back to New Orleans for a year and worked. I did an externship, and then I came back and worked for a year, and then I moved to New York City. And New York was, of course, kind of the holy grail, at least in the United States.
Was that when you went to Quilted Giraffe?
No, I didn't get to the Quilted Giraffe until after I got back from Europe the first time. I went up to New York. I worked at a couple places. I ended up in a small bistro in the upper East Side called La Petite Ferme.
Oh, I remember.
Yeah,
that.
It used to be right next to an American Place, right there on Lexington, between I guess it was 70-71, and the owner of the place had a family restaurant. It was run by his brother in Beaune in Burgundy. And my deal was that I would spend a year working for him under the assumption.
France?
Yeah, no, in New York, and then I would have the opportunity to go and work for the family business in France. And I viewed that as my in to my first externships in France. So that's how it started.
So is that how you got to the Hotel de la Poste?
That's how I got to the Hotel de la Poste. Which was fantastic.
In Beaune, France. So he's in the heart of the Burgundy wine country there.
And yes, and then I had the opportunity to actually start to eat at these restaurants I had been reading about for the past 5 or 6 years.
What was that like? Did it live up to your expectations?
Well, the first one I went to, of course, was Bocuse. Bocuse was, the emperor. He was the one. It's the one where you gravitated towards, and I remember meeting him. Him coming out to the table for the first time, and it's. You kind of shake. You're a young person, and you've been reading about someone like that, and it was a great meal. I really had a transformative meal on that trip, on that first.
Where was that?
At a restaurant called Alain Chapelle.
Alain Chapelle.
In Mionnay, and
that was 2-star Michelin.
No,
3-star.
Yeah, it was 3. It was 3, and he was part of this whole Banda Bocuse group of chefs. Had trained under Ferdinand Poin and gone out and had really kind of elevated. And were the next generation of what was going on in France at that time. They were kind of the basis of the Nouvelle Cuisine at that point in time. But Chapelle...
Wait. Let's explore that a little bit for our listeners. So Ferdinand Poin had a restaurant called La Pyramide outside of Lyon. And it was considered the greatest, probably, restaurant in France, one of the greatest restaurants.
Certainly before pre and post World War II.
Right.
He was self-taught. He kind of broke out of the mold of Carême and Escoffier. He really focused in on regionality and restaurants having a regional character and being reflective of where they are. He started from scratch every day. And
you mean restaurateurs didn't do that back then?
I think speaking in generalizations, hotels and large kitchens, French cuisine was very codified at that time. Things were done a certain way, and if you didn't do it that way, then you were doing it wrong. And I think Pointe was a cook who went by taste, and he was inspired by ingredients. And he was inspired by where he was. He had no interest in traveling anywhere.
So he was doing a nouvelle cuisine.
Well, yes, he was a new generation.
Nouvelle cuisine means new cuisine, right?
Yes, of course. I mean, it's in France, you had Carême, and moving into Escoffier, who did a lot about sanitation and codifying, and what a brigade was, and how to be efficient, how to get things done, and a certain sense of what it meant to put on a chef's coat, that you weren't a domestic, You weren't a slave. You weren't just a lowly servant of sorts, but it was a respected profession. And of course, Escoffier realized that, if he could elevate the profession, then it'd be a better profession, and he would attract better people to work. And it wouldn't be the dregs of society, which, let's face it, for the longest time, cooks were really the dregs of society. It was a job that most people didn't want to do, and you didn't live a long time. You were breathing. You're breathing coal fires, and you're working in terrible conditions. Yes, of course. And so Escoffier, a lot of people talk about the greatness and the genius of Escoffier, but my opinion is Escoffier, the greatest contribution he has made, even though he has this tremendous repertoire of recipes, was his codifying of what it meant to be a cook and the efficiency of a kitchen, and meat stations and entremets, and you don't wear your uniform out of the kitchen, and you present yourself if you present yourself as a professional, you'll be paid as a professional.
He was a military man, wasn't he? Didn't he cook for a general? And
he cooked for a lot of people. He cooked for a lot of royalty. He cooked for a lot of royal families. The base, most of his career was in London, which was a big media center there, and I think that's really why he made his name. He's very famous in New York. He did a lot of cooking in New York.
Oh, really? I didn't realize you come to New York.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get back to you, but I had no idea you're such a historian. This is really fascinating.
Yeah.
But it's really goes into your DNA of a chef, of the way you look at it as yourself as a professional.
Well, I think it's like in any profession. It's great to be creative. It's great. It's wonderful to be forward thinking and trying new ideas. But just like in many other artistic endeavors or craftsmanship, it's always great to have a basic understanding and a foundation and of the traditions of where you came from. It's easy to throw out old traditions in the way people used to do it before. You throw it out and say that's old-fashioned, but you can't throw it away unless you know what it was. You have to know what you're throwing away. You can't paint an abstract painting by splattering paint on a canvas if you can't draw a figure. You have to decide you don't want to paint a figure after you painted figures, and you learn to master it, and you learn the craft and the discipline of what has come before you can decide whether you want to reject it or not. And it's something you can see through very quickly with a cook or a chef or anybody else.
How long does it take to be a chef?
I'm still learning.
But for someone, to all the young chefs out there, what do you think they have to do to get to the stage to say, okay, I'm ready to take on my own restaurant, my own style? Because there's some kids that come out of school and they want to open a restaurant right away, and they really have no experience. They've learned a few techniques. What does it take to be a chef of your stature? To really be the top of the game, to really understand that craftsmanship. I know you're still learning every day. Even Andre Soltner tells me he's still learning every day. But when do you get to that point where you can have the self-confidence to say, I'm ready to open my own place and have my own style? You can answer that two ways. In terms of cooking, and your own style. I mean, developing your own style is.
Ferran Adria said that he always broke down cooking into and learning and developing your own style into 3 stages. And the first one was what he called imitation. Imitation is where you went out and you imitated the people you idolized or what you felt attracted to. Maybe you work for someone, a mentor, and you're so enamored with the style and how much you have learned that you imitate it because it's what you know, and you probably master that style. And the next one is assimilation. So and assimilation is that you start to have your own ideas, but you're still building upon what you've learned from these mentors and what you've been imitating. You start to feel a little bit more confident and maybe probably spreading your wings a little bit, but you're still, for lack of a better word, derivative. Derivative, I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, but it means like people will perhaps eat your food and they will know where it came from. They will know that you have put your own spin on it, but they will know where the genesis of the food is. And the last step is innovation. And innovation happens when you have this accumulation of influences, not only from people who you work for, but as have you gotten older and you become more mature, whether it's travel experiences, what you read, perhaps other interests that have influenced in how you cook, but most importantly, a certain sense of self-confidence in your abilities, that your style becomes your own. So imitation, assimilation, and innovation, I think, are three very relevant steps in describing how a personal style comes to take place. And I'm always fascinated by the last one, innovation, because usually when the self-confidence and the maturity is there in a cook, the food tends to be at its most simple. You know, at that point in time, the cook has realized that he doesn't have to be showy, he doesn't have to put a lot of things on the plate, that he can back off, and through his own skills and his maturation, which he has learned to have respect for and confidence in his ability to cook, he realizes he doesn't have to make it complicated, he can make it simple. And when that happens, then you realize you really have to use great ingredients, because at that point, then you have no place to hide. So I think an understanding for really, truly great ingredients, and everybody talks about, I go to the market, market cuisine, it's seasonal, but you know what? There is an upper echelon. There is a certain percentage of ingredients that really are the best in the world. And cooks are not alchemists. We cannot take mediocre product or a product that everyone else uses and through the magic or the skill and the wonderfulness of us being chefs can transform it into a great product. Because once you master the skills, really the only best way to improve the dish and make the dish better is actually to take the fundamental building blocks, the ingredients, and improving the quality of the ingredients or the seasonality or whatever. And then it gets more complex. Then you talk about regionality, cooking where you're from. A tomato on the West Coast versus a tomato on the East Coast. Why would I import East Coast tomatoes? The food, it just wouldn't make sense in that context. So we were talking about and then you mentioned when do you know?
When do you know?
Well, at that point, then I think you realize that being a cook and being a chef, and then moving on to being a restaurateur or being in charge of a restaurant, that is when you get this horrible realization that cooking is the easiest part of your job at that point.
Okay,
because
wait, we're gonna pick up on that thread, but we've got to stop right now and take a little break, and we'll be back with David Kinch. David, I've never heard that so well said about the evolution of a chef. I can't wait to get back to the second half here. Okay, this is heritageradionetwork.org, and I'm Dorothy Can Hamilton from the International Culinary Center. We're talking with David Kinch out at Manresa in Los Gatos, California. We'll be back in a minute.
Hi, I'm Steve Jenkins from Fairway Markets. I've devoted my idiot career to the old ways, the old recipes, the old tools, the old geography of where serious foods come from for centuries. And I've strived to make these wonderful things available to New Yorkers for 37 years, so it's a fait accompli for us to support Heritage Radio Network. And I hope you will too, and I hope you'll keep tuning in. For more information, please visit fairwaymarket.com.
Welcome back. This is Dorothy Can Hamilton, and I'm speaking with David Kinch, the incredible chef out at Manresa in Los Gatos, California. And we were just speaking, David, about when does a chef know he or she is ready to take on their own restaurant and start their own style?
Well, I think, at some point in time you decide that, you're no longer going to work for anybody. You're going to be your own boss. And I think you come to very strong realization at that point that the cooking aspect is the easiest part of your life, your job at that point. And then it becomes an understanding of management and motivating people and motivating staff, because you will realize that you're only as good as the people who work for you and who you inspire to carry out your vision, because it's not just one person. I think learning to delegate certain aspects of the business is a big part of the maturation project, not micromanaging every single thing. You don't. So, many, especially nowadays, many different people are motivated in different ways. Some people you have to grab them by the ears and bang their head against the wall for them to understand what you're saying. And other people, they need a brotherly arm around the shoulder, and you need to whisper gently into their ear about what you want them to do, and it's not what they're doing the way they're doing it now. So, learning how to motivate people and getting the best out of them and creating a team. To this day, it was the last thing I learned how to do. I'm still learning how to do it, but it's also the most difficult part of the job.
It is.
Is motivating people.
And when you figure it out, you can teach at Harvard Business School, right? Because what you're saying is, and chef actually in French means chief, mm-hmm. and the head of a bank in France is called a chef, and I don't think Americans realize that.
Yeah, chefs are in the dining room. They're called.
Right. You're a manager. That's well. Let's get to your restaurant here. Manresa, I want to ask you, you, more than almost any other chef I've ever met, have spent a lot of time traveling through the world, and not only that, spending a significant amount of time in great restaurants in many different. You've been in Spain, Germany, France, Japan. Give us a short, global history of what did you pick up from each of these restaurants and how long you were there?
Well, I went on in the early '90s. After doing some work in New York and moving out to the West Coast, I was kind of at an impasse, I felt, in my learning. I was in my late 20s. I decided I would take a trip, see the world, and work in some restaurants. This was before the internet, where it was really easy to set up a stage. You wrote letters. Remember letters?
Yes, right.
I picked 10 restaurants, 10 or 12 restaurants. I wrote them all letters. I paid someone to translate the letters into the original language out of showing respect, and you mailed, and then you wait by the mailbox. You waited by the mailbox for a response, and I, maybe 50% of the people I wrote to even responded. Half of them said no. And the ones who said yes, those are the ones that I went to. At that time, I was, when I was working in New York, a restaurant called the Quilted Giraffe, they closed for the entire month of July. So for about 3 or 4 years, I was traveling, for a month in Spain, and it really wasn't it wasn't necessarily for culinary purposes, though. I learned a lot about the traditional products just before this whole postmodernist food explosion was happening in in Spain, and people were eating very traditional, it was ham and just a very regional cuisine, and it was great. It was really, really nice, but I became enamored with what was going on in the Basque Country. I had spent some time in San Sebastian, so I knew I definitely wanted to work there. So that's why I chose Spain. France obviously was the no-brainer. And when I was in New York, there was a great German chef who came through the Quilted Giraffe kitchen, dropped off some of the books that had come from their property, and they were really gorgeous, and the food looked amazing. And I wrote them a letter, and they responded well too. So I said,
how long were you in Germany?
I was in Germany for about 5 months.
And what's this? You don't hear much about German haute cuisine. What was it like there?
Great product. They brought great product in from all over. A lot of their product was from Rungis, but we were in at the Frankfurt market 3 times a week in a van at 4:00 in the morning. The cooks took turns doing that.
Wait, so Rungis is the big market outside of Paris.
That's correct,
so
but it supplies most of Europe. I mean,
it does?
it doesn't. I shouldn't say it supplies most of Europe, but it has a reputation of being like an epicenter for a lot of the very best product coming out. And
so how did you get to Japan?
I got to Japan. I went and worked in a restaurant it was actually a Western-style restaurant. It was in Fukuoka, which is the largest city on the southernmost major island of Kyushu. And I got hooked up there through a regular customer at the Quilted Giraffe Quilted Draft, of course, was one of the first restaurants in the United States to incorporate a real kind of Asian aspects to the food at that time, and Berry Wine at the time was very enamored with Japan. I kind of picked up on that myself. I was eating a lot of Japanese food at that time. I still do. I'm fascinated by the flavors that they get using absolutely no fats, or a minimal amount of fat, which, occupies a lot of my time thinking that through and figuring out how they do that, in such a diverse. But anyway, in any case, I was looking for an opportunity to go and live over there, and.
How long did you live over there?
I was over there for about 4 months, and it would have been longer. I had visa troubles.
Of course.
I had some issues. I had originally planned to stay for a couple of years, but I came back. I came back unexpectedly. I ended up being in San Francisco. I worked a couple places in San Francisco.
You were at the Mandarin Oriental.
I was at the Mandarin Oriental Hotel. This is before this long extended period in Europe. And after I got back from Europe, I opened up my first restaurant in Saratoga here in the South Bay. I originally intended to open in San Francisco. Really couldn't find anything that I liked or afford.
Yeah, that's the issue with the big cities.
With the first, we opened up in Saratoga. On the proverbial shoestring.
Really? How much did it cost to open that first restaurant?
It was maybe $130,000.
Wow.
It's small, 30 seats, an old building, kitchen the size of a closet. And, it was busy from the day we opened our doors. We kind of were at the right place at the right time, Silicon Valley, 1995. The market was booming. The economy was going great.
That was Sansovi. Did you name it?
Yes.
So what does that mean?
Sansovi is the name of a Catalan language cookbook from 13th century, unknown Catalan author. He's believed to have been a cook in the English royal court at that time. It was considered the most influential cooking manual or cookbook of in the world at the time before the discovery of the New World. It was fascinating that the recipes were codified. There were pictures and diagrams of fish from the Mediterranean, along with the Latin names and the best ways to prepare them. So it was really encyclopedic in its approach. And you can still buy it today. It's still in print today.
So what? So that really grabbed you? Did you? Was it inspirational for the food you were doing there?
Yeah, I was good. At this point in time, we were. This is 1995. We were cooking a lot of. The food had a real kind of Catalan, inflection in it at that time, because it was something I was really interested in. Actually, Sansovi was the working title while we were making the name. We figured we would pick a more manageable name by the time we opened up, but that of course became the least of our worries. And when it came time to decide,
so 30 seats. How many people in the kitchen?
We had like 4.
That's a lot.
Well, that's including a dishwasher.
Oh, okay. No, I meant cooks.
Yeah. It was me and 2 other cooks. Someone doing pastry but we were doing tasting menus out of that.
Really?
Yeah. We developed quite a following. We got good press, and we were busy. But after 6 or 7 years working on such a small kitchen, some people can really do it, but I felt really limited by the space and not being able to get any bigger, at least in terms of the kitchen. We wanted to find a place that we weren't limited by our
kitchen space,
by our physical space.
Is that because in order to do the food that maybe your imagination goes to, you need equipment, and the equipment wouldn't fit in there? Is that?
Yeah, that, and the ability to move around and that sort of thing, and just not a lot of space. I mean, we had ideas. We knew what we wanted to do, and we wanted to be considered a great American restaurant. I just didn't think it was going to happen in that space. I was, ever since I read and looked at the great chefs of France, that Quentin Cru book, Anthony Blake and Quentin Cru, that's who it was. Every cook should have that book. You should find it. Find every, it's out of print, obviously, but I think every cook should have a copy of that in their library. But I was fascinated. The book talked about all these great chefs from all over France and how their restaurants were reflective of where they were. Brittany, they used Brittany products. south of France. They used a certain product that you just simply wouldn't use. You learned about how cuisine was broken down by regionality, is broken down by fats. In the Southwest, you had pork and goose fats. You had olive oil in the South, and of course, you used butter and dairy products in the North. And you realize, you started thinking about it in an American context. And that's what always attracted me. Well, why can't American restaurants, great American restaurants like these ones I'm reading about, why can't we have these restaurants in the United States? Why can't we have a regional cuisine in America? And then you start to read about it and you realize, well, we do have regional cuisines in America, but they've never really been celebrated or dug in deep. And of course, that is a generalization because, we have heroes now. People have written books, for the past 150 years, a lot of them by women, who were home cooks. They weren't professional cooks, but they're the ones that kind of codified, the Deep South. I mean, you have, Low Country and then Cajun, and you have what goes on in Mississippi. You have Texas and the whole concept of, slow cooking beef. I mean, you can say the greatest culinary contribution America has ever made might be, Texas barbecue. You're talking about brisket, the lowliest of cuts, salt and pepper and smoke, and the sublime. It's a technique, and it's something that's been developed over time. And you have the Pacific, Northwest, you have the Midwest, and of course you have California, where I am too, and the whole food revolution that has affected America that's happened in Northern California.
Okay, let's stop right there. We're going to take a break, and we're going to come back and see where you've taken that and how Manresa is maybe the ultimate American restaurant.
HeritageRadioNetwork.org is dedicated to providing the most up-to-date information and news on the food industry. Interviews with chefs and in-depth pieces on food systems take listeners literally from the farm to the fork. Can you hear this anywhere else? Nope. Press the donate button on our website and learn how you can become a founding member and support the station.
Welcome back. This is Dorothy Cann Hamilton, and today I'm interviewing David Kinch at his gorgeous restaurant Manresa in Los Gatos, California. And we're just getting to the stage where David's going to tell us how he took his love of product and expressing it with American ingredients. I understand you make your own fleur de sel. You go out on the ocean, you bring in buckets of water, and you dry your own salt. Mm-hmm. This is love of product. What? Tell us about.
Well, it's an excuse to not come to the restaurant and get out on the water.
I got to go make my salt. Salt to the earth. Yeah, right. Well, first of all, Manresa is celebrating its 10th anniversary. This week.
This week, yes.
So very exciting. Congratulations.
And speaking of Bushwick, we actually have Carlo Maracci in the kitchen right now cooking, for tonight's dinner.
I know. It was so ironic to walk in here and see Carlo. It was great. But tell us, what was first of all, Manresa, I believe, is the name of a Jesuit high school in New Orleans. Is there any connection between your New Orleans background and this restaurant?
It might be, but it has nothing to do with, Manresa is a beach. It's a beach south of Santa Cruz, where I live. There's a Manresa beach, but Manresa is also a very large, old Roman town outside of Barcelona, where the Jesuit order of monks, where Junipero Serra was from, who was the explorer who named the large part of the coast and founded the missions along the California coast. So that's that California-Catalan connection. We were looking for a Catalan name when we were moving Sansovia over to here. We wanted to keep kind of Catalan inflection, and I think we kind of lucked out in finding something that represented both where we came from and where we currently are.
Yeah, that's perfect intersection. Yeah. Well, so tell us the menus at Manresa and the backbone of it with American ingredients. And we were going into American regionality and celebrating it. How do you celebrate it here?
I was born on the East Coast. I grew up in the South, but I've lived the majority of my life at this point in California, in Santa Cruz. I don't know what that means, but it means something. But it's really shoehorned in nicely with what I had learned about quality of ingredients and sourcing which really kind of became the backbone of our philosophy and what we do here. And we kind of built on that. So you have this tremendous work that had been done, starting with Wolfgang and Alice and Jeremiah Tower and a host of others, names that people don't hear about. But James Beard was originally from Portland, Oregon. The whole West Coast, and everything has been about quality of ingredients, simple, almost kind of an outdoor kind of cooking. Grilling was kind of a stereotyped aspect of it. A rustic, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but it was kind of like the connotations of what was going on, and this abundance of product. You had great migratory waves going through, the French and Italians in mid-19th century, who planted all the vines and all the olive trees along, a good part of the coast of the West Coast, which is predominantly a Mediterranean climate. We have dry and wet seasons. That's kind of how it works. It's, we're more like the south of France than anything else out here, not very temperate. And then, of course, you have the great Asian migrations also, and that's why I think in California we have the ability to really seamlessly combine elements from great Western European traditions and what's happening on the Pacific Rim, because they've been a big part of the development of the West Coast ever since the very beginning. They're not newcomers. I think these are great traditions to build on. Of course, the wine industry speaks for itself out here in California. I think the next great ingredient revolution you're going to see in California is all these olive trees out here. I think you're going to see an olive oil industry that is going to rival the best of any in the world, whether it's Greece, Spain, France, and
Italy,
and of course Italy. Because you have huge groves out here, not necessarily of the right varietals. They planted varietals back then of trees that produced a lot of oil and decent oil, but not great oil. But they have been slowly, over the past 30, 40 years, they have been transplanted to quality varietals. And, of course, with the classic story of American ingenuity and hard work and maybe not getting it right the first time, but never giving up. And I think the next generation or so, you're just going to see some of the best oils in the world created out here. And I think this is a great example of why I'm here in California. This spirit of wine and cooking fats, the great quality fruits and vegetables, which are really.
Let's talk about that. You have Love Apple Farm. That's your farm.
Yes. Well, it's not my farm. It's the farm with Cynthia Sandberg and her partners. But we have an exclusive partnership. We have an exclusive partnership.
How exciting is that for a chef? And how do you work with the farm?
Well, it's certainly the most satisfying aspect of being a cook here at the restaurant, but it's also the most challenging because the menu changes fairly frequently here. A lot of my time is spent working with Cynthia and her team, not only deciding what to grow, but the amounts we want to grow. We're trying to tailor the farm to the needs of the restaurant so we can be respectful and not wasteful for the obvious reasons, but we're constantly looking at product that works, products that don't work, products we might want more of. But when we want cabbage, we have to plan for cabbage. We can't pick up the phone or go to the farmer's market. I mean, we can, and we're not trying to be dogmatic about it, but what we like to think of is, well, we'll create dishes with cabbage or fennel or whatever it may be, and we plan about 3 seasons ahead.
So you have to do your menu 3 seasons, or at least your product menu?
We do the product menu ahead. And, we go and we walk through. We might walk by that bed of cabbage, when it's, just starting. And we look at it and say, oh yeah, cabbage, and every time you walk by, it gets bigger and bigger, and then all of a sudden you get to this period and realize, I'm about ready to have a lot of cabbage coming to the restaurants, and we need to figure out how we're going to use it and how we're going to incorporate it into the menus. So sometimes that's really hard to do, but it's also incredibly satisfying to do it also.
Do you put vegetables up? Would you make sauerkraut?
Yes, of course. We
take your tomatoes.
We do everything we can to not waste anything. It's a big part of what we do.
So you have this whole farm at your disposal, and you're trying new things. For other chefs out there, how much of a financial burden is it?
It's a big one.
I was going to say, is this sustainable?
Well,
for a lot of people dream of that, and you hear freshness of product, and I think so many people are jealous that you have this growing season and this incredible farm. And it is biodynamic, it is incredible, it is beautiful.
They do tremendous work there. Cynthia at the farm, she has this big educational program at the farm. They take a lot of farming externships. She takes externs in from people who work various agricultural programs all throughout the world. A lot of them journey halfway around the world to come and spend 3 months working at the farm.
I know we take students from our Campbell School.
Yes, of course, from the Campbell
School.
School.
You're the dean. I forgot to mention, David is a dean at the International Culinary Center, and we're lucky enough to take students out there.
It's really pretty amazing what's going on there. It's become an educational center. They're teaching over 100 classes a year there, everywhere from making macarons and traditional jam making techniques to beekeeping, to urban chicken coops, backyard chicken raising, making your own soaps. It's really kind of a sustainability center, a homesteading center in the foothills of the mountains. And
so how does that translate on your menu? Tell us about a dish. Well, tell us maybe a dish that you're most proud of, one of them, that really expresses the essence of Manresa.
Okay, we have a dish that's, we have a signature, probably our one signature dish that's always on the menu, and it's called Into the Vegetable Garden. And it's always written like that on the menu, but the dish ironically changes every day. The dish is, of course, it is based upon an idea and a dish from a really great French chef, a guy named Michel Bras, and it has our own little spin on it. But what that dish is supposed to be, that dish is what we want it to be, an edible reflection on a daily basis of Love Apple Farms. In other words, if something is coming from Love Apple, then it needs to be on the plate in some sort of shape or form. And if it's not from Love Apple Farms, it can't be on the plate. And those are the only two rules for it. We have one and sometimes two people in the kitchen whose sole duties are this dish and separating everything out. And it usually has anywhere from about 40 to 60 ingredients on the plate.
Oh my gosh.
And almost everyone has it in the dining rooms, both the tasting and the prefix menu. So, we'll make 50, 60 of these a day, and they're made to order. And everything is placed on individually. It looks like a salad, but it's not a salad. And one day, Malabar spinach is available, and then it's out of season. Then it's no longer at the farm, or a specific cabbage leaf is not available or no longer, and then it goes off the dish. But when it comes in, it goes on the dish. And so they're constantly thinking about. They're responsible for ordering and making sure that the stuff comes in. That their whole job, their whole day is based on taking everything still warm with the dirt on the roots and transforming it to the plate. A couple bites of 40 to 60 ingredients, where every bite is completely different. So
that is an amazing. So do you let the cooks decide that, or are you the final taster? Well,
I'm the final taster, but we're in a rhythm with the dish. The dish starts with elements that are only root based and cooked on they're the first thing on the plate. And then we have raw roots on the plate. Then there's cooked leaves and stems, and there's raw leaves and stems, and then on top are the flowers and the seeds from the various plants. So the dish itself actually resembles the ecosystem of plants. Yes. Which sometimes people don't see, but you can't see everything. But that's our thinking behind it.
I know you're coming out with a cookbook.
Yes.
Tell me about it.
It's a Man Racer cookbook. It is the story of the restaurant, the 10 years, the story of the restaurant, told through recipes, photographs, and narrative. We're very excited about it. We have a great publisher, 10 Speed, who has shown a tremendous amount of passion for this project, and we're really excited to working with them. The photographer, the writers, everyone involved is really excited about it. We're moving forward with that, and that should be available fall 2013.
I can't wait.
No, I can't wait either.
Actually, I have about 10 more questions, but we've run out of time. Can I come back and do this again?
You're most welcome anytime.
2?
Anytime.
This has been extraordinary.
Maybe we can do it in Bushwick.
At Roberta's, and get a pizza. Jean-Georges says to me, I'm going to do it out there because I can't get in otherwise. Yeah. Okay, well, this is Dorothy Cann Hamilton, and I've been speaking with David Kinch of Manresa Restaurant, and we're out here sitting in Manresa in Los Gatos, California. It's been an extraordinary interview. Thank you so much, David.
My pleasure.
And I want to thank Jack Inslee, our producer, and Heidi Tickle and Joe Sevier, my assistant producers on this program. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to this program on heritageradionetwork.org. You can find all of our archived programs on our website or as podcasts in the iTunes Store by searching Heritage Radio Network. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at @heritage_radio. You can email us questions at any time at info@heritageradionetwork.org. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization. To donate and become a member, visit our website today. Thanks for listening.